There you go, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we come to the next segment, and this is really exciting. This is a keynote. Artificial Intelligence is the New Electricity by Andrew Ng, co-founder Coursera. Besides being the co-founder of Coursera, Andrew is also an adjunct professor of Stanford, an AI researcher, educator, and entrepreneur. Andrew has authored and co-authored over 100 research papers in machine learning, robotics, and related fields. He holds degrees from Carnegie Mellon University, MIT, and the University of California, Berkeley. Andrew, I'm going to request you to come up and join us on stage and take us through this session. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Andrew.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and when I started preparing for this presentation about a month ago, I spent some time thinking through what I thought might be most useful to share with you today. So what I hope to do is talk for 20 minutes and then have time for questions at the end as well. But what I hope to do today is tell you a bit about what's really happening in AI to cut through the hype, and then talk a bit about the opportunities for each of you as individuals, or for corporations, or for maybe the Indian government, both central and state governments, in terms of the new opportunities that the rise of AI is creating. The title of this presentation was AI is the New Electricity. About 100 years ago, with the rise of electrification, we started transforming every major industry, everything from transportation, communications, manufacturing, healthcare. In fact, today we're in a hall with electric pot lights and electric pot projector, and electricity has transformed so much of what we do. We don't know how to run healthcare without electricity today. I think AI has reached the point where, similar to electricity 100 years ago, there is a surprisingly clear path for it to also transform every major industry. And because a lot of these developments are still nascent in India, there are a lot of opportunities, maybe disproportionately large opportunities for each of you and for each of your corporations to capture what you can do in terms of AI. So I thought I'd do something different and do a whiteboard presentation today to explain some of these ideas. So hope this is legible. Right. So I've been saying AI is the new electricity. Now, there is a lot of hype about AI, a lot of excitement about AI. But to cut through the hype, it turns out that even though AI is creating tremendous economic value, it turns out 99% of the economic value created by AI is through one type of AI, which is all about A to B, or input to output mappings. And the technical term for this is supervised learning. Is that legible? Great. But for example, for a long time we've had AI that could input an email and output, is this spam or not, 0 or 1. And thanks to the recent rise of deep learning, this is actually working better than ever before, deep learning neural networks. For a while, I was working on loan approvals. Input a loan application, and output, will they repay this loan? Right, 0, 1. And it turns out that if you could do this accurately, this is a great way to decide on loan approvals. The single most lucrative application of this A to B, input to output type of AI, may be online advertising, where the online ad platforms all have the large online ad platforms all have a piece of AI that inputs an ad and inputs some information about you, and tries to output, will you click on this ad or not, 0 or 1? Because for the large online ad platforms, every click is money, and so there's a large incentive to try to show you the ad that you are slightly more likely to click on. This is very lucrative. Maybe not the most inspiring application, but very lucrative. We're seeing the rise of speech recognition, right? Today, both Google and Baidu have disclosed that over a large fraction of their mobile queries, over 10% of the mobile queries, are through voice search. And that's powered by a type of AI that inputs an audio clip and outputs a text transcript. And if you look at new products like Amazon Echo, right, the Alexa, or Apple Siri or Google Home, or in China, the Baidu Dura OS, you can, if you have an Amazon Echo in your home, you can say, Alexa, what time is it? And the reason you're willing to use voice control for these devices is that it's now actually getting really accurate. If Alexa woke up only half the time when you said, Alexa, what time is it? You'd be very frustrated. But it's because it actually is very reliable now that users are willing to adopt this. So one pattern you see in AI is that the accuracy, the performance of your AI system for speech recognition has a huge impact on your willingness, on your customers' willingness to adopt this, your accuracy in all of these things, in how accurately can you show the most relevant ads or figure out what loans to approve. This actually has a big impact on customer adoption or on your bottom line. And so we still live in an era where the AI technology is important. Having an elite AI team to build this out has a big impact. A few other examples: machine translation, input English, output, Hindi or Tamil, or for a self-driving car, input a picture of what's in front of your car, and maybe the radar readings, and output the position of other cars. Right. I'm on the board of a Drive AI, self-driving car company, and this is a crucial part of pretty much every leading self-driving car startup, self-driving car team's technology stack. But what you see is that so much value is created through this idea of learning input-output, or A to B mappings. And one of the communications problems of AI is that just supervised learning by itself is enough to transform multiple industries. For example, my new organization, Landing AI, has been doing a lot of work on manufacturing. And one of the things we do very well is visual inspection, where we input a picture of a part, that's A, and output, is there a scratch or a defect in this part? And so we're able to help manufacturers with visual inspection using AI. So one of the challenges of AI is that just with this formula, A to B mappings, we can create tremendous economic value, but there's still a lot of work to figure out the use cases of this type of AI technology and to work them into your enterprises. Now, one question that I've been asked is, some people ask me, hey, Andrew, why is AI only taking off now, right? Supervised learning, this idea, has been around for many decades. And when I'm asked that question, this is the picture I draw. And if you go back to your organizations, you could draw this picture for your teams as well, which is, if on the horizontal axis, we plot the amount of data you have for a problem. Over the last couple of decades, with the digitization of society, we started to accumulate more and more data. So we really moved to the right of this axis. For example, if you place an order for a new, for a whiteboard, once upon a time, the whiteboard you ordered was recorded on a piece of paper, and that piece of paper may be in some filing cabinet, in some other country. Today, the fact that you order a new whiteboard is more likely to be represented via a computer record. So in a lot of industries, rise of IoT, rise of IT, created more and more data. If on the vertical axis, we plot the performance of your AI system, it turns out that with a traditional AI algorithms, it was as if the traditional AI techniques didn't know what to do with all the data you now have access to. And so, performance went up a bit, but then flattened out. But what started happening in the last 5 years was we started to realize that if you build a neural network, so if you train a small neural network, NN here, stands for neural network, and if in the media you see the term deep learning, the terms neural network and deep learning mean very similar things, almost the same thing, except maybe deep learning has been a more popular brand. But if you build a small neural net, performance looks like that. If you build a medium-sized neural net, performance looks like that. And if you build a very large neural network, the performance kind of keeps getting better. So in an era where the performance of your AI system matters, where your speech recognition system, online ad system, your automatic visual inspection system for manufacturing, where you really want good performance, you kind of need two things. One is you need a lot of data, and maybe big data has been one of those buzzwords. And second, you need to really build reasonably large neural networks to take advantage of all the data you now have access to. But with the rise of GPU computing, today even small startups can get access to build reasonably large neural networks. But I think it's really the rise of data and compute that's driven a lot of this progress. One rule of thumb I've given to a lot of teams is, again, people often ask me, what can AI do? One rule of thumb is anything that a typical person can do with less than a second of thought, of mental thought, right? AI can probably now or soon automate. And so I've given this rule of thumb to some of my product managers, and this resulted in some of my product managers, running around some of my companies and trying to look for things that you can do with a second of thought to try to automate. In fact, a lot of the examples I had here, things like look at a picture and tell me where are the other cars. Those are things a human can do in less than a second of thought. It's an imperfect rule of thumb that has been useful for some organizations. Now, it turns out that the growth of AI often requires C-suite attention because AI is shaping corporate strategy. A couple of years ago, I've seen that a lot of CEOs regretted not coming up with an internet strategy earlier. And I think 5 years from now, we'll have a lot of CEOs wishing they had come up with an AI strategy earlier. When I look across different industry verticals, there's a pattern I've seen, which is if the horizontal axis is time, what I see in a lot of industries is first comes the IT revolution. So if the vertical axis is effectiveness, right? So the IT revolution is still not mature. No one's done with the IT revolution. But in a lot of industries, first takes off IT, and then a little bit behind that comes the AI revolution. And the reason of the sequencing is IT creates data, which AI then comes in to eat and create value. So for the different industries you're in, I often advise people to look on this horizontal axis and see where your industry is to try to decide whether you are AI ready. For example, I think that the financial sector is actually quite far along. So because a lot of finance work has been digital, so there's been a lot of data for a long time, and so AI is making a lot of progress in fintech. I think that healthcare is actually earlier, right? I think that, in the United States and in India and in China, digitalization of electronic medical records is underway, not yet done, but if you get an X-ray, today it's more likely that your X-ray will be a digital image rather than a physical piece of X-ray film. So the digitalization of electronic health records in the United States will be driven by the Affordable Care Act. But this has created data, and we're seeing AI really start to take off. I think even a little bit earlier stage would be, I think education is earlier. 10 years ago, when a professor gives a talk or gives a lecture, the words kind of evaporate. What goes to the students' heads, but there's no digital record of that. Thanks to the rise of massive open online courses like Coursera, but also Khan Academy, lynda.com, and so on, we have more and more data in education. And so we're starting to see AI take off. I think manufacturing is also earlier. I see a lot of potential in manufacturing, but I think for a lot of industries, you see first IT take off and then AI take off shortly after that. And one of the challenges with AI is that it actually affects corporate strategy and how you build your enterprises. So in the AI era, the way we build defensible businesses is different. So one pattern you often see is you might, actually here's an example. Several months ago, there was a company in the US called Blue River that was sold to John Deere for, I think, $300+ million US. And what that company did, they were Stanford students when they got started, so I knew them when they were doing this as Stanford students, was the students I knew then, they went around with their cell phones and took a bunch of pictures of cabbages in the field. And this created a small data set. It allowed them to build a product in which they started to build a giant computer vision rig that would be towed up and down these agricultural fields to look at heads of cabbages and decide which heads of cabbage to let live and which ones to kill, because this increases crop yields. But with a little bit of data that they got through scrappiness and taking pictures with their own cameras, they built a little product that wasn't great, but some users were willing to accept it. So some farmers started to use this. And by having their rig go up and down these fields day and night, or well, during the, they accumulated data, and this put them into positive feedback loop, so that over time they accumulated a very large data asset of pictures of crops in fields. And so today, Harvard Silicon recently, I think that they probably have one of the largest, or possibly the largest data asset in the world of these pictures of plants half buried in the dirt, and this actually makes their business very dispensable. So this is maybe just one of the examples of sequencing out data acquisition strategy and why and the way that we build companies and make them defensible is changing in the AI era. Now, let me just share two last things before we, well, a couple last things before we wrap up. If you remember nothing else from this presentation, remember what I share with you here. Spent a lot of time studying the rise of the internet. And one of the lessons I learned watching the rise of the internet was that if you take your favorite shopping mall and build a website for it, this does not turn your shopping mall into internet company. Right? So a few years ago, I was talking to a CEO of a large US retailer, and he said, well, his CIO said, look, we have a website, we sell things on the website, Amazon has a website, Amazon sells things on the website, it's the same thing. But of course it's not. What defines whether or not you're an internet company like Amazon or Flipkart is not whether or not you happen to have a website to sell stuff, is whether or not you've organized your company to do the things the internet lets you do really well. For example, internet companies have a lot of A/B testing, because we can. We're used to running thousands of experiments at a time. We have short shipping times. We can ship a new product every day or every week rather than every 6 months. Internet companies are very good at pushing decision-making to engineers and product managers, because you can't just have a CEO tell everyone what to do, because the technology and the product and users are so complicated. So these are the things that really define an internet company. So this was with the rise of the internet era. How about the rise of the AI era? I think a traditional company could even be a traditional tech company, plus a few neural networks, or plus a bit of deep learning. This does not make you an AI company. And one of the reasons why I think there's such a huge opportunity for all of you today is because no one has fully figured out what are the principles of building an AI opportunity. Some industries like web search is mature. It's really difficult to build a new web search engine today. But AI is so immature that there's a large opportunity for individuals and companies and governments to embrace it and be the leaders in figuring out what is down here. I am biased since I led AI teams at Google and Baidu. I think Google and Baidu, also a few other companies, I think Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft are doing a great job. A lot of respect for some things Infosys, Accenture, Tata are doing. But we're all in the early phases of figuring out what this is. But I think that AI companies tend to be very good at strategic data acquisition. We tend to build unified data warehouses. If you have 50 different data warehouses under the control of 50 different vice presidents, it's impossible for an engineer to get approval from 50 VPs to get access to data. I think that AI organizations are very good at spotting pervasive opportunities, pervasive automation opportunities. I think that we tend to have new job descriptions. Right? But the way we organize the workflow, our product managers understand that part of the new product requirements document is data, for example. So I think because AI is so nascent, no country is mature yet in AI, and this gives everyone a disproportionate large opportunity to jump in and to embrace this today. So let me just wrap up with a few thoughts and then hopefully have time for a couple questions. I want to wrap up with some thoughts for individuals, corporations, and governments. So for individuals, the old world meant that you could go to college for 4 years and coast for the next 40. But today, tech has a paradigm change every 5 years, and tech has infected every other industry. So the thing that is constant now is lifelong learning. And I think things like Coursera, Khan Academy, lynda.com, and so on, make it easier than ever before to keep learning all your life. And our economy is very good at rewarding people with the appropriate skills. So I think that for individuals, part of it is to put in the hard work week after week, not just for a weekend, but week after week to gain the skills that allow you to keep participating even as tech changes. For corporations, you know, I think I had a Harvard Business Review article on building a centralized AI team. And then I think also employee development. You know, I think that, well, here in India, we've seen some large companies unfortunately had to lay off large numbers of people, even while at the same time you have a large numbers of openings for jobs that you have difficulty filling. I'm seeing that the smart CEOs and the smart COOs, chief learning officers, are learning that what you really should do is curate content rather than create content. Because today, the job of the chief learning officer is changing, and there are now ways for companies to use online digital content to educate huge numbers of people and engage in large-scale workforce development in a way that wasn't possible before. But there are tactics on building an AI team as well. I guess talk about this in a Harvard Business Review article that maybe don't have time to go into. And then I think government has a large role to play. You know, leapfrog. Because AI is so nascent, India, many countries has a chance. AI is a small but rapidly growing pie, and no one has a large piece of the pie yet, no one in the world. I am excited about building an AI-powered society. I want all of you to have self-driving cars to get around in. I want everyone to have access to lower-cost, high-quality healthcare. I hope that in the future, every 5-year-old child has access to fantastic education. And I think governments should invest in education as well as build up research, since a lot of this is a public good. Government, I think the Chinese government has been very thoughtful. Private sector support can really help the private sector adopt AI. And I think there's a lot of work that a government can do with a community building or ecosystem building. And because no country today has a mature AI community, we're all still building it. Any country that gets its act together can capture a large piece of this AI pie. Maybe could you, if you can bring up the questions, I'll try to take a few questions if I'm all of time. But let me just share, do you have the, was there a question app? I can also keep talking or not. Okay, yeah. Okay, and so let me just share one last thought. You know, on Coursera, we're seeing that one of the largest groups of users of Coursera is from India. And I think India's moved beyond low cost, right? India's value proposition used to be low cost. You move beyond that. And what's after low cost has got to be high value. Now, where can you create high value businesses and high value services? You could go into mature categories, like build a web search engine, but that's really hard. But because AI is so immature, and there's a small pie, but that's growing so rapidly, I think the AI as a category is actually a very valuable thing for individuals and corporations, and potentially for both central and state governments to try to build. So let me just take a few questions. Oh, is AI an existential threat? I think almost all the value created by AI is building specialized intelligence or narrow intelligence today. There is some fear about general intelligence, but one of the problems is both narrow intelligence and general intelligence, we use the term AI to describe it. So one of the reasons for the unnecessary hype is I'm seeing a ton of progress in building narrow intelligences. I'm seeing very little progress in building general intelligence. So we can think about it, but it may be hundreds of years before we, have to seriously worry about that. So it's worth thinking about, but artificial general intelligence is so far away. I've said before, I think worrying about evil AI killer robots today is a bit like worrying about overpopulation of planet Mars. Maybe I'll take one more question and then break. I think the second question, I love that. So how do digital transformation and AI help underprivileged people? I thank you to Wani for asking that. I think that in the tech world, we've done a great job creating tremendous wealth. But what I'm passionate about and what I hope you are willing to do as some of the most important and influential people in the world is if we want to build not just a wealthier society, but also build a fairer one, we have a lot of work, important work ahead of us. I think AI can help provide lower cost and high value healthcare, transportation, educational services. But I think that there is, and I think jobs, if you look at ethical challenges of AI, I worry a lot about jobs because we will transform the work of a lot of call center operators, a lot of radiologists' jobs will change, we'll sell driving cars, a lot of human drivers' jobs will just go away. So I hope that as leaders, individuals and as leaders, we will worry about not just how to create more wealth for our society, but how to create more of a fairer society. I'm personally really excited about building an AI-powered society. We'll make life so much better for everyone. And just so all of you know, I'm here in India today because I don't think the AI-powered society will reach its full potential without a large participation from India. And so I am here today, and I'm personally very committed and would love to help support the Indian community because I think the AI-powered society, we built an electric-powered society 100 years ago. We now have to build an AI-powered society, and I'm personally very committed to helping and supporting India and doing what I can to help all of you help India realize a big piece in that future society we'll build. I think I'm out of time, but so let me just thank you all very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment of truth, what makes you an internet or an AI company, people, technology, performance, data, learning. There was so much on that whiteboard that happened. I hope you got the snapshot of it. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us here. And thank you for a wonderful keynote. As a token of our appreciation, we'd like to hand over a tiny memento.
Oh. Thank you.